Hello everyone, and welcome to our first lesson of Unit 1 for our new topic, leisure. Today we're going to be studying the development of sport with our objective to uncover how sport has developed and changed over time. Now, your starter for today is to simply write down numbers 1 to 6 on a sheet of line paper. And we're going to do a quick fire quiz on our previous units. That's going to be USA, Germany, and Elizabeth, just to check our knowledge on those. And then we'll be starting off with our new unit of leisure. So once you have numbers 1 to 6 written down on your sheet of paper, you can go ahead and click play and proceed with the video. So you've had a chance to write down numbers 1 to 6 and answer them as best you can. We're going to have a look at the first one. What event happened on the 1st of December 1955? That is, of course, Rosa Parks was arrested and the bus boycott began. So you can have her arrest or the bus boycott beginning. Both are correct. Number 2, who is this man? This comes from our Elizabethan unit, and this is, of course, Francisco de Mendoza. Number 3, the name given to Elizabeth's version of Ofsted, the people who went around checking all the churches and making sure everything was in order, and that is the Visitations. Remember, she had 125 commissioners. Number 4, what was Hitler's foreign policy to do with gaining more land? Literally translates into living space, which is Lebensraum. Number 5, name 2 of Nixon's foreign policies. Well, you could have détente or Vietnamization, also known as the Nixon Doctrine. And number 6, what did Stalin do in 1948 and 1949? He did the blockade, also known as the Berlin Crisis. So you may be wondering, what are we going to be studying? Well, our GCSE curriculum is broken down into 3 different topics of study, if you will. We have a period, an in-depth, and a thematic. Now, our period study is our America unit. It's studying a given section of history, generally no more than about 100 years in length. And we study America from 1929 until the year 2000. We cover 70 years of American history. In-depth study is a bit different. So you study a specific section of history in quite detail, usually no more than about 50 years, which is why we look at Elizabethan England from 1559 to 1603, or Nazi Germany from 1919 to 1939. So those are our 2 in-depth units. And then we have this one called thematic. And it's studying broad trends in history with little emphasis over specific dates, details, and people, but instead the greater changes. And this is our leisure unit. Now we're going to cover 1,500 years of history. And I know it sounds like a lot, but you won't be expected to know about a tennis match that took place on the 14th of December, 1952, but you'll be expected to know what kind of technology tennis uses to measure whether the ball is in or out. So a lot less on the specific details, more on the greater changes. So specifically in leisure, we will cover the following things. We have 6 units of study, and we're going to look at various changes in Unit 1, which is sport, Unit 2, which is travel, Unit 3, which is entertainment, Unit 4 is music, Unit 5 is children's games, and Unit 6 is cruel sports. Now we also have a site study unit that we add onto that, but it's only 2 lessons in length, 3 lessons in length. It's not a standalone unit in itself. We will answer why there have been specific changes over 3 historical eras using themes. Remember, this is thematic study to illustrate how these changes occur. And we will learn about the general changes in topics such as sport, travel, entertainment, music, children's games, cruel sports over time, and why these changes have occurred. So what are these 3 historical eras that we're referring to? We need to know that we have the medieval era, the early modern era, and the modern era, and we must know the years in which these eras occur. So please now, in your note, write down medieval era is from 500 to 1500, the early modern era is 1450 to 1750, and the modern era is 1700 to present. When you're done doing that, you can go ahead and hit play again and resume the video. I think many of you might be wondering, well, how does the medieval era end in 1500 but the early modern era begins in 1450? It doesn't quite make sense. And why do we have this crossover period? Well, there's no exact date that historical eras change. It's kind of like asking, when do you become an adult? Is it when you turn 18, or is it a process that takes place over a period of time? And maybe there's no exact date that you can say the day you became an adult, but it was kind of when I was about 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 years of age. So if we want to illustrate these 3 historical eras on a timeline, we can take a look below. The medieval era would appear between the year 500 and 1500, and sometime around 1500, that's when the early modern era began. So that, we say, begins in 1450. It's going to go to about 1750. The modern era, again, we have that 50-year crossover beginning in the year 1700 going on to the present day. Historians don't know the exact dates these eras changed, but we have a rough idea of when they did. We just have this crossover period, if you will, to make sure that no specific historical event will occur outside of a given historical era. So as our first lesson is about the developments in sport, it's understandable to take a look at how sports have evolved and changed over time. And a main way that these changes occur is with rules being added or removed to suit those who played at a particular point in history. Now, some sports, such as football, they've been popular for nearly 1,000 years in this country. And even King's Henry VIII, he was one who actually banned the sport because it was viewed as too violent and sort of distracted people from their religious obligations. But there are other sports that have lost a lot of popularity and are no longer being played by very large groups of people anymore. And one of those sports is haggis hurling. We're going to look at a video in a moment. What I'd like you to do is to try to write down the 4 main rules to haggis hurling as you watch the video.
We're getting ready.
Oh, so you won't let me have the wall? And you're not even going to put them on?
Right, really go for it. Think of the man. Void. Void. Void.
So we've just seen a short clip about haggis hurling, and the rules are as follows. You must wear a kilt, and we saw the individuals at the start putting the kilt on and wrapping it around themselves. You must dust your hands, and that's because haggis is quite sticky, and you need to get a clean release from your hands. So you would dust your hands with either chalk or just kind of like almost dust or sand. You must stand on a barrel lid, or a barrel in this case you can see in the image on the right hand side, and that's to avoid you from taking a running start or from putting too much of your body weight into the toss. And you must throw the haggis as far as you can. When it lands, it's not allowed to break. So if you were to throw the haggis 35 meters and it broke and split open, someone who threw it 20 meters would actually win if it did not break upon impact. So the farthest throw that doesn't break is going to be the winner. Now, this is not a particularly popular sport anymore. It does take place in very small numbers in a lot of rural areas, especially in the north of England is where it was more so popularized, but not really in the southeast where we live. So looking at changes in sports, go ahead and write down the following 3 tables that say lawn billiards then and now, boxing then and now, and football then and now. And what we'll do is take a look at some images for you to write down what lawn billiards was like in the past and what it's evolved into in present day. So take a few moments now, go ahead and pause the video to make your 3 tables, and when you're ready you can go ahead and hit play. So here we have lawn billiards. We can see it has 2 players, someone with a ball and then someone with a bat. This has actually evolved into modern day bowling. So in your table, lawn billiards then, describe what you see. So we see 2 players, one with a ball and one with a bat. And then under lawn billiards now, we can see a man at a bowling alley. Having a look at boxing or wrestling then, so make a note of how many participants, the clothing that they're wearing, and particularly what they are wearing on their hands. And boxing now. So again, we can see a significant difference in terms of the clothing being worn or lack thereof in the picture on the right, but also in terms of the equipment being used. Our boxers and wrestlers on the left-hand side for boxing then aren't wearing any protective equipment on their hands. And boxers today now wear boxing gloves. And we have mob football. So this is football then. And we can see quite a chaotic game with lots of players. We see a boy actually clutching his shin. Looks like he got kicked and he's grabbing someone's hair at the same time. And we have football now. So again, just make a note of the amount of players, equipment being used, and the violent or non-violent aspects. Your final task in homework is to choose a sport from the list below and to do some research and answer the following 5 questions. So for example, you might pick shinty, that's kind of an early form of field hockey, mob football, cold hand stool ball, grappling, that's kind of like wrestling, or bare knuckle boxing. Do some research about any one of these and answer the following 5 questions. So who created the sport? You may find there's no particular person, but maybe it was a group of individuals who created it. When it was created, if you can find a year. Are there any important rules that must be followed? For example, in mob football, the only rule was there are no rules. Is there any special equipment required to play the sport? And did it change or evolve into a sport that we now play today? So go ahead and take a few minutes just to write down the sport that you're going to be researching, write down the 5 questions, and you can conduct your research.